Have you ever noticed that sometimes our eyes speak more than our mouths, but they also conceal secrets we don't always want to reveal? It's curious how, in certain situations, the simple act of looking away becomes almost automatic, like a bodily reflex, to protect ourselves. But protect ourselves from what? Carl Jung said that often we're not avoiding the person or the situation, but rather running away from something inside us that we're not ready to face. It's as if the unconscious builds an invisible wall between us and whatever threatens to reveal what we're hiding, even from ourselves. Imagine yourself in the middle of a seemingly ordinary, casual conversation, and suddenly someone brings up a topic that seems trivial to others, but for you arouses a slight unease. Your gaze shifts, as if seeking refuge. You may look at the ground, a little to the side, or at an insignificant detail in your surroundings. It may seem like a harmless gesture, but for those who understand the silent language of the mind, this moment is revealing. Jung called these signs the shadow, the unconscious part of our personality where repressed feelings, pain, fears, and even aspects of ourselves that we don't accept as part of our identity are stored. This averted gaze is more than a social habit or a sign of shyness. It's a symptom of the unconscious trying to prevent certain emotions from arising. According to Jung, we spend a large part of our lives constructing a social image, what he calls our persona, the mask we wear to fit into the world, be accepted and protect ourselves. But this mask doesn't entirely define us. Behind it hides the shadow, and it is this shadow that often manifests itself in small, involuntary acts. When we touch a sensitive spot, the persona tries to maintain control, but the shadow sends a signal of discomfort. And this glance, so quick, so discreet, becomes the messenger of this silent struggle. Think about the times you've looked away, not out of embarrassment or distraction, but because you knew deep down that facing that moment was like looking into a mirror that showed you something you'd rather not see. For Jung, this is a golden opportunity for self-discovery. It's not about feeling guilty or ashamed, but about asking yourself, what exactly am I avoiding? This question, though simple, can open doors to profound answers. For what you're avoiding is not just a detail of the present, it's often an old wound, a deep fear, or even a desire you've learned to repress. And this is where Jungian thought becomes provocative. Jung believed that nothing in the unconscious exists by chance. Everything we repress, everything we avoid, everything we deny, remains alive and seeks to manifest itself. The averted gaze is one of these manifestations, subtle, almost imperceptible, but loaded with meaning. It is like a small tear in the curtain separating the conscious from the unconscious, letting a fragment of truth escape, even against our will. The key is to understand that this isn't a flaw or a failure, but an invitation. Jung said that by observing our own actions, especially those we perform without thinking, we begin to identify what lies hidden in our shadow. And the closer we get to these blind spots, the closer we come to the process he calls individuation, the path to wholeness, integrating not only what we show the world, but also what we hide. But first, it takes courage to observe. For what you're avoiding, looking at may be something that runs counter to your self-image. It may be a resentment you've been denying, a desire you've learned to view as wrong, an insecurity you've always masked under apparent confidence. When you catch yourself avoiding looking at someone who confronts you or a situation that bothers you, your first instinct is to think it's just a passing discomfort. Yet that moment is like a traffic light in the middle of your mind's highway. It indicates that there is something worthy of your attention. The fascinating thing is that, according to Jung, the more we run away from these inner parts, the more they find ways to attract our attention. And if we don't pay attention to subtle signs, like a shifty gaze, these parts can manifest more intensely, through disturbing dreams, seemingly unjustified emotional outbursts, or even through decisions we make without understanding the reasons. It's as if the shadow is telling us, "You can ignore me, but you can't erase me." So when we say that what your averted gaze reveals, we're not talking about a trivial gesture, we're talking about a secret code in your mind. And if you're willing to crack that code, you'll find answers not only to your weaknesses, but also to your potential. Because deep down, the shadow isn't all bad stuff. Often it harbors talents, passions, and strengths that you've pushed aside because someone, at some point, told you they weren't acceptable. The next step is to begin consciously observing yourself. Don't rigidly monitor yourself, but notice the moments when your gaze wanders. At those times, ask yourself, what exactly am I avoiding seeing right now? This simple question can turn small, automatic gestures into opportunities for self-discovery. Jung believed that when these hidden parts are illuminated, they cease to control you from the shadows and begin to integrate into your being. The averted gaze, then, is much more than a detail. It's a portal, and if you have the courage to step through it, you'll discover that within you lie stories you've never told, emotions you've never processed, and truths that can set you free. Looking at what we avoid is perhaps one of the most difficult, and at the same time, most transformative, exercises on the Jungian path. For ultimately, it's only by facing what we avoid that we can truly say we know ourselves. If you've ever realized at some point that your own eyes betrayed your feelings, this conversation is for you. And before we continue, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and share in the comments a moment when a simple glance spoke louder than your words. There's no need to go into details that make you uncomfortable, but sharing can be the first step toward understanding the importance of this gesture in revealing hidden stories. Jung reminded us that behind every reaction lies a deeper motivation, even if it is invisible at first glance, and that the unconscious, that vast inner ocean, is constantly seeking to communicate. The gaze, in this sense, is a privileged messenger because it does not need permission from the conscious mind to act. It is quick, automatic, and almost always sincere. When we look away, we may be reacting to something that threatens us emotionally, but which we cannot always name. It is as if the body is saying, "That's enough for now," even before the thought is fully formulated. What's fascinating is to realize that this visual leakage isn't necessarily a flaw. Jung saw it as an opportunity. The discomfort we feel in these moments is like a warning signal, signaling that something important is there. He believed that our shadow, that hidden, repressed side of ourselves, doesn't just store fears and guilt. It also harbors valuable aspects, such as gifts, talents, and intuitions that we reject because at some point in our lives, someone taught us that it was inappropriate or dangerous to reveal them. By paying attention to the times you avoid looking at someone or a situation, you begin to notice recurring patterns. You might notice this happening whenever you feel like you're being judged, or when you fear someone will discover something you consider a weakness, or even when someone awakens a memory you'd rather keep dormant. Ultimately, for Jung, the more you run away, the more power you give to what you're avoiding. It's like feeding a ghost. It grows in the darkness and only shrinks when you confront it with the light. And here's a crucial point. It's not enough to force eye contact. Facing what we've been avoiding goes far beyond simply staring at someone. It's an inner effort, requiring the courage to ask, what does this situation evoke in me? Why does it threaten me? Where does this reaction come from? Jung said that self-knowledge isn't comfortable, but it is liberating. For when we bring into awareness what has been hidden, we are no longer under its influence. Interestingly, the moments when we look away can also be linked to good things we don't accept. Think about it. How many times have you received a compliment and, instead of looking at the person, you looked away, lowered your eyes, or pretended to be busy? For Jung, this could reveal a difficulty in recognizing one's own qualities, the result of a self-image shaped more by criticism than by recognition. It's as if the shadow protects not only our pain, but also our light, and that, out of fear or habit, we avoid facing them. Another important point is that, in intimate relationships, averted gaze can be perceived and interpreted differently. To those who pay attention, it may seem like insecurity, lying, or disinterest. But in reality, it may simply be an automatic self-protection mechanism. This is where Jung's study comes into its own. He invites us not to judge immediately, but to seek to understand what lies behind this gesture, and even more so, to apply this understanding to ourselves before applying it to others. The practical exercise Jung would suggest, if one were to apply his thinking to a modern context, would be to create moments of pause. The next time you realize you've looked away, don't beat yourself up or try to fix it immediately. Simply mentally record what was going on, how did I feel at that moment. Then, in a quieter moment, reflect on it. Little by little, you'll begin to decode the silent language of your unconscious. And this decoding is a goldmine on the path to individuation. There's also a cultural dimension to all this. In some cultures, staring is a sign of respect. In others, it's interpreted as a challenge or aggression. Jung, studying different societies, understood that, despite the evolution of social codes, the relationship between the gaze and the unconscious is universal. In other words, wherever you are, your gaze will continue to be a bridge between what you show and what you keep to yourself. Ultimately, there's something liberating about accepting that the averted gaze isn't an enemy, but a teacher. It's not there to shame you, but to show you where you still have work to do on yourself. Perhaps this is why Jung emphasized so much the importance of facing our shadow, for deep down, it's in this realm of light and shadow that we find our true identity. The gaze is only the beginning of this journey. When Jung spoke of the shadow, he didn't just see it as a reservoir of trauma and unwanted behavior. For him, the shadow is also a reservoir of vital energy, creativity, and authenticity. And this is where the gaze takes on an even deeper role. It reveals not only the places we fear to enter, but also sources of personal power we ignore. The problem is that often the fear of discovering what's there keeps us away. So we keep looking away, without realizing that, in addition to what we're avoiding, we're also forgetting to access an essential part of ourselves. This process is very similar to walking down a dark hallway. At the end, there's a closed door. You know it holds something important, but you're not sure you're ready to open it. Whenever life places you in front of that door, whether following a difficult conversation, an unexpected encounter, or a moment of reflection, your instinct is to withdraw. Looking away is, in this sense, a visible retreat. But Jung would say that, in order to evolve, we must walk through that hallway, touch the handle, and face what lies on the other side. And this is where the central concept of the individuation process comes in. For Jung, individuation is about becoming whole. It is about uniting light and shadow, integrating all parts of our psyche, those we show and those we hide. This process is neither quick nor comfortable, but it is the surest path to living an authentic life. And one of the most effective starting points is to pay attention to these small gestures, like looking away. They are like loose threads that, once pulled, can reveal a whole web of experiences and memories that shape who we are. What makes this path so difficult is that the shadow doesn't speak directly. It communicates through symbols, mistakes, dreams, and automatisms. The averted gaze, in this sense, is like a whisper. If you ignore it, it repeats itself. If you continue to ignore it, it can scream, manifesting itself in a more forceful way. How many times have you noticed similar situations repeating themselves in your life, as if they were constant trials? Jung believed that the unconscious, repeats unresolved experiences precisely to offer us new opportunities to confront them. There is, however, a natural resistance to looking at the shadow, and this resistance is not a sign of weakness. It is part of the psyche's defense mechanism. Jung was clear about this. We should not judge or condemn these mechanisms, but understand them. The psyche protects itself from what it finds unbearable, but over time, what once seemed unbearable can become manageable, provided we approach it with caution and awareness. It's like accustoming our eyes to darkness. At first, it seems impossible to see. After a while, we begin to distinguish shapes, outlines, and even realize that there is beauty. Now think about your relationships, family, romantic, professional. How many times have you avoided looking at someone because you felt they saw more of you than you were willing to show, or because they touched on a wound you'd rather hide? These moments shouldn't be seen as failures. For Jung, they are milestones on the path to individuation. They show where there's still work to be done. And here's a powerful key. Instead of avoiding these situations altogether, you can use them as an exercise. The next time you notice your gaze wandering, consciously try to hold it for a moment longer. Feel the discomfort. Notice what it triggers. It's not about forcing yourself to endure something unbearable, but about creating small openings for awareness to enter. Jung said that what is not made, conscious returns like fate. In other words, if we don't look at what we're avoiding, we run the risk of repeating patterns without understanding why life seems to go around in circles. Jung also put forward another perspective. Often, what we avoid seeing in others is a reflection of something we avoid seeing in ourselves. He called this projection. When someone arouses deep discomfort in you, they may be reflecting a part of yourself that you don't accept. And the gaze, once again, becomes silent proof of this dynamic. By refusing to look at the other, we are, in a way, refusing to look at ourselves. This is why the process of individuation requires radical honesty, not with the world, but with yourself. It's admitting, yes, this bothers me, and I may not know exactly why, but I want to know. In doing so, you transform the fleeing gaze into a searching gaze. Instead of running away from what threatens you, you begin to look for what you can learn from it. This shift is subtle, but profoundly transformative. And this doesn't just apply to the emotional realm. Even our practical decisions can be influenced by what we avoid facing. The work we didn't choose, the opportunities we pass up, the conversations we put off, all of these can be linked to aspects of our lives controlled by our shadow. Jung said that until we become aware of what lies in the unconscious, we will continue to call bad luck or fate what is actually a hidden choice. Looking at what we avoid is, therefore, not just a psychological exercise, it is an act of freedom. It is about regaining the ability to choose clearly, without allowing ourselves to be manipulated by fears and outdated patterns. It is about taking a resolute step towards fulfillment. When we learn to face what we avoid, something quietly but profoundly changes. The gaze, once shifting, lingers. Not because the discomfort has disappeared, but because we find the courage to sustain it. Jung said that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act even in its presence. And in the face of the shadow, this courage is transformative. After all, what we avoid seeing, whether in ourselves or in others, often contains the missing pieces that allow us to live more fully. It's important to remember that looking at the shadow doesn't mean drowning in it. Jung always emphasized the importance of balance. Just as we shouldn't live in denial about what we hide, there's no need to dive into everything that's hidden at once. The process is gradual. It's made up of small victories. A glance that lingers a second longer, a conversation we might have previously avoided, a thought we finally allow ourselves to examine without judgment. And little by little, this practice transforms the way we interact. we begin to see others with more empathy, understanding that they too have their shadows, their fears, and their defense mechanisms. Looking away, once interpreted as weakness, becomes a human sign, a reminder that we all carry invisible stories. This understanding builds bridges, brings people together, and eases the burden of judgment. What your eyes avoid reveals, and when you accept this revelation, you discover that life becomes easier, not because your problems disappear, but because you stop fighting with yourself. And this inner peace can't be bought, it can be cultivated. It comes from patient work, small daily choices, and a quiet commitment to your true identity. If this reflection touched you, resonated with you, or reminded you of times when your eyes spoke louder than your words, please share it in the comments. I read each one with care and attention because I know that these stories, although different, share commonalities that unite us all. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to join us. Each conversation is an invitation to a deeper reflection, not only on the world, but also on ourselves. Perhaps, in the end, this is the greatest lesson Jung left us. Don't be afraid of what your eyes avoid. They don't betray you, they guide you. Simply have the courage to follow them where they don't want to go.